Well, good morning if you are somewhere out on the Pacific Ocean watching the sun come up on this beautiful May 2nd, 2025. Good afternoon if you are perhaps in the state of Georgia or New York City. Good evening if you're in Cardiff in Wales, and greetings to people all over the world. As I said, it's May 2nd, 2025. Welcome to Fred Plotkin on Fridays on Adagio, the place where classical music happens. Adagio, as you know, is a video and audio streaming platform dedicated to supporting artists and to making classical music and opera available to music lovers all over the world. As I said, it's May 2nd. My birthday is in May. This show just had its fifth anniversary, so I'm giving myself and my listeners a gift in the month of May. It's called Fred's Favorites. And I'm having on artists and other people who have not yet been on, who are my favorites, and therefore all objectivity is thrown to the wind this month. And my first favorite of the month of May is the wonderful mezzo-soprano Jamie Barton, who joins me, I'm guessing, from her home. You don't have to tell me, but she joins me from a happy place. Jamie, thank you for starting off the month of May, the very, very month of May, in wunderschönen Monat Mai.
Schon im Monat Mai, indeed. Hi, Fred. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a minute since we've gotten to chat.
It has been a minute. The last time I think you and I chatted, we actually did a presentation together with a lot of wine. It was during the pandemic, and San Francisco Opera was streaming its Ring cycle,
Yep.
and you and I were picked to basically co-host Siegfried, and I sent you some wine.
You sure did. I
Some,
remember that
it was
very, very
called
well.
Fricka wine, wasn't it? Or the
It
woman
was.
who made it was named Fricka. And we did a lot of tasting through the course of the cycle and Siegfried. And the great thing about Siegfried, it's the only part of the Ring cycle that definitely has a happy ending. I mean, not if you're Fafner or
Right,
Mima,
well, it depends on the character entirely, I would say. But
but for
yeah, it's
Brunhilde and for Siegfried, it looks pretty good, at least right
at least for the
now.
time being.
So I want listeners to know why, if they don't already, because there are people this program reaches who are in parts of the world where Jamie Barton has not yet sung. Jamie Barton basically was shot out of a musical canon, even if she had to prepare and come to the moment. But when the opportunity arrived, she really nailed it. And I I think if I remember the first time I heard you was the Met National Council Finals,
That
which
makes
was
sense.
April 1st of 2007.
April Fool's
And
Day.
April Fool's Day. And for April Fool's Day, you did what a lot of young artists would do who are mezzos. You sang from Handel,
Hmm.
Priva son di ogni conforto. And I
Hmm.
thought, okay, so maybe for the next you'll do Verdi or Bellini or something like that. You did the witch from Gilbert Humperdinck's Hansel and Gretel. Why? I mean, you won, so no complaint. But why?
It's funny, the story of that particular aria in me. I had loved it since my first voice teacher gave it to me. He gave it to me because he wanted to challenge me on that high B flat that comes at the end. Because for the longest time, I was scared of anything that's like had any notes above the staff. I picked arias based on if it had things that were above the staff or not, which was hilarious when I was singing Carabino, by the way. I was never meant to sing that. But there wasn't much above the staff. The tessitura just set high. But I had been loving this aria for the longest time, but I kind of just had gotten it in my head that it wasn't like the proper kind of thing that you bring with yourself to the Met. And the summer before I actually signed up for the Met competition and did it, Galetha Nichols was going around per usual doing her summer tour, going to all the different festivals and hearing the young artists. And so I was at my two young artists summers. I was at Opera Theater of St. Louis, and then I would road trip over to Tanglewood and be at Tanglewood for the rest of the summer. Very, very lucky of me, honestly. But I sang Va from Werther. at Opera Theater of St. Louis, and she was very kind, said thank you so much, and I was like, okay, and I left it. I didn't really get commentary, and I was like, okay, that's so cool. And then I got to Tanglewood, and I saw the list was up. You could sign up to sing for Gayleth, and I was like, I'm gonna do it again, and I'm gonna sing something different, and let's just sing something I like. And the Witch's aria was the thing that I thought of, and I got finished singing that for her, and she literally stopped, got up, went and closed the door, and came back and was like, I have it in my notes that you sang Va for me a few weeks ago. And she was like, I'm going to be very honest with you. I don't remember it. She was like, but this is something that gets your personality out. It shows a lot of range. It's not an aria that we hear a ton, but it's one that I think is really, really good for you. You should be starting with this. This should absolutely be in your package. And I was like, okay. So when I went to the Met competition, that was, funnily enough, I was actually doing Hansel and Gretel at the time when the first round of the Met competition happened. I was upstairs rehearsing at Indiana University, got into my very fancy wear, went downstairs, did the Met competition, ran back upstairs to complete rehearsal before they were announcing the winners at the end, and then came downstairs and found that I had been passed on. But the aria just became a bit of a calling card for me in a way at that point in my life. Um, you're about to get a cameo from River, by the way. Um,
Good.
my
Always
kitty
welcome.
cat. Sometimes she likes to make appearances. Um,
She has now joined a legendary list of pets, dogs and cats, and a couple of birds, and unexpected bows that appeared
sure.
on
Oh my
these
gosh.
programs.
But yeah, so long story short, it was one of those arias that for me always kind of got me out of my head. If I was singing one of the classics like Va or even Privason, I chose Privason because it was something completely in contrast to the Humperdinck. I wanted to show the
Yeah.
legato, I wanted to show what I could do in the language. But the Humperdinck for me, it just got me out of my head. And all I had to do was be the character, tell the story, and sing it the best I could at the time.
Yeah.
And it worked. So, yeah.
And then, as often happens with the winners of the competition, even people who don't win but are finalists, the Met and Maryland, San Francisco, and Chicago and Houston, the major companies start picking you guys up and putting you in productions and so on. And you were taken in at the Met and did what
Houston.
Houston also, but
No, but I wasn't a part of the Lindemann program. I
you were
was
not part of the
only,
Lindemann program, but you
yeah.
became on the Met roster pretty quickly.
Yes. Yes, I
Compared
understand.
to most
Yes.
people,
Yeah.
the Met just can't absorb people right away,
It's true.
but
It's
they sort
true.
of fast tracked you. And I go to a lot of performances of the Magic Flute. It's a great opera, but I always go to see who the three ladies are because
Really?
inevitably the three ladies wind up becoming stars. And this is where they learn the Met stage and productions
hmm
and all of that. And you were the second of the three ladies,
Yep.
and a lot, really a
Yeah.
lot. And I thought, when are they going to use her in something else? Because a lot. And then you went off for a little bit. You went to Wales,
hmm
and the leading singing competition in the world outside of the Met, let's say the big two,
Yeah.
is Cardiff in Wales, the singer of
Yeah.
the world competition. The Met is the Met National Council Lafont Finals, and it's terrific. But it's largely people from North America, whether they're born here or move here, whatever.
Yeah.
But Cardiff, it's kind of like you have, the Estonian and the Zimbabwean and the Peruvian and the American and so on. And
hmm
you were the American. And so I had a lot of competition already to become the American. And I want you to describe it. There are two categories.
Yeah.
There's opera singer and leader or recitalist singer.
Basically, yeah.
And I remember one year that Dmitry Voristovsky won the opera singer and Bryn Terble won the leader singer.
Yeah.
And in almost every single circumstance, one person wins one, the
Yeah.
other person wins the other, except for Jamie Barton. who took both. How did you feel? Did you feel selfish and greedy when you did that?
I felt surprised. I felt utterly like, honestly, Fred, there is still a part of me that can't believe that. Like on so many levels. There was a tenor who had won both before me, several competitions before me. He was the first. I was the second person to come along and take both of them. Um, the main competition, the opera competition, is the one that we all go there to do. That one is the reason you're there. The song competition is not compulsory. You can choose to not do it, but I had started my training in undergrad at a small liberal arts college that just didn't have a theater really. We had a black box theater that we shared with the theater department, the musical theater department as well. But certainly not an opera space. And when I was there, the closest thing we did to an opera was Die Fledermaus in English in the black box space. So, I mean, truly, we
What
had to
role did
do.
you sing in Deflator Mouse?
Oh, Orlovsky, of
Okay,
course.
just checking.
Definitely Orlovsky. Had a really fun time. We were all double cast, had a great time with the other mezzo going to the local tuxedo shop to get fitted. But because of the lack of resources to be able to do big productions, we did a lot of concert work, a lot of recital work. That was where I got my ground underneath me, was in that kind of stuff. And I love it. I remember Marilyn Horne being asked at one point if she had to choose between opera and recital, what would she choose? And she said she'd choose recital. She also said she could always throw an aria on a recital. But, you know,
Well, since you brought her up, I was going to bring her up in about a half hour, but I'm going to bring her up now.
go
Um,
for it.
she and I are friends for 40 plus years. We've
Yeah.
done a lot of work together. She is a night owl, so am I.
Yep.
And therefore, very frequently the phone would ring at 2 a.m. and she would say, with language I'm not going to use on this program, about the best effing singer she's heard in a long time. And, or more likely, she would say, there's someone you have to hear.
Yeah.
And I remember that she called me up after Cardiff and she said, if you haven't heard her, you have to hear Jamie Barton. And I said, well, I've heard her a lot as a second lady, and I heard her sing at the Met competition. And then she used a lot more profanity, but in a positive way. And said that basically the path was wide open for you and that you have, as she, I remember the word, she said she has it as a song singer too.
Hmm. That, first of all, thank you for sharing that with me. It means the world.
Another time when we open the wine, I'll tell you all the language.
I look forward to that. No, Marilyn, I mean, very, very seriously, Marilyn, I credit with so many of the doors that were opened for me in the beginning of my career. She, in my last semester of grad school at Indiana, I was on her master class at Carnegie.
I heard it.
And a couple of weeks after that, I got a call from Barbara Hocher offering me the chance to open their recital series the next year because the person who had been in that slot had to withdraw. Um, and so she gave me my New York debut in two different ways, both with the master class and then with that recital. She invited all of Cami to come to the recital. That's where I got my management. I got offers to be at the Met. She then gave me another offer to sing at Carnegie on a duo recital with Russell Thomas, which is where we met, and we've been singing together since then. Um, she gave my name out to so many people that gave me opportunities in that very I think it's normal for a singer who is going from academic age of life into career. There is a gap that happens for everyone. Some people get super lucky and bridge a portion of the gap going into a young artist program, but there is, I think, for everyone, at some point, there is the no man's land of how the heck am I going to pull this together?
Yeah.
And Marilyn was just such a vocal supporter of mine that
Yeah.
even though there was that gap, there was absolutely some years where I had to figure out how to pay the bills. I still had gigs coming in and I still had opportunities, and it was because of her. So I just, this is a woman I will eternally love in
Me
so many
too.
ways.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I'll cook with the wine and then we'll talk even more.
I look forward to that.
And all positive. I don't have a negative thing to say. It's really she's the gold standard.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so after those second ladies and then Cardiff,
yeah,
we're talking a time frame of about 4 years, well, 6 years between the Met competition and Cardiff. So those are tough
yeah,
years.
yeah.
Singing a lot of second ladies, which is good.
A lot.
But
Yes.
then all of a sudden, how? You come back as Adalgisa in Norma with Angela Mead, who also won in 2017 in 27, and Alexander Antonenko and Ricardo Fried. So there were two performances that year,
Yep.
and it was the hottest ticket. And it was kind of like it was the Sutherland and Horn redux in that everybody had to be at the Mead, Barton, and some tenors. I mean, Antonenko was excellent. I'm not saying that, but the interest was really these two young women who very recently had won the Met competition and
Yeah,
then suddenly were shot out of the cannon, so to speak.
yeah.
Even though it was 6 or 7 years, was it a shock to the system to suddenly go from competition to second lady to
Oh, yeah.
Adalgisa?
Yeah. I mean, even before the Adalgisa, Fred, I'll tell you, I sat down with my manager, Michael Benchetrit. Um, we got together at the Cami offices. He had done a really, really wise thing when I did Cardiff because he had managed, still, I believe, manages Nicole Cabell, and she had won Cardiff as well. So he had been through it. He had known what this looks like when you win Cardiff. And before I had even done the competitions, he said to me, he was like, "Listen, if this goes in your favor, and I hope it does, we're going to put a pause on accepting or saying no to any offers that come in for about 2 to 3 months. And then we're going to sit down and decide what you want to do." And I was like, "That sounds amazing." So we ended up doing that. And essentially, I met with him up at the Cami offices, and we determined what the next 5 years of my life looked like. Um, that was the real shot out of the cannon moment for me in many ways, because here I was planning not only, okay, when do I want to sing these things that people are offering me, but when am I going to have any time to learn these things?
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
how do I structure this in a way that it's tenable, saying no to probably half of what came in just because we couldn't take everything. And that was the real moment where I literally walked out of the Cami offices and over to Ninth Avenue to a bar, sat down at the bar, got a drink, and started crying. And it was the kind of crying that it was like both, oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to learn all of this music? How am I going to fulfill these contracts? But also, oh my God, how lucky am I? I just get to choose what I want to do now. And it really, Cardiff was the thing that turned, I mean, that was the shot out of the cannon moment. That was the thing that enabled me to be able to do that. But it was funny, Adalgisa was just a few months after Cardiff.
Yes.
Yeah, Cardiff was in the summertime, Adalgisa was in
Autumn.
October.
Yeah.
And I it was, I think at that point I was already just on the, okay, all right, we're learning things, we're doing them, we're fulfilling the obligations of the contract, we're singing this the best we can. I remember I actually have a recording on my phone from going over and coaching Adalgisa with Marilyn. Actually, she
Hmm.
there's a lovely moment where she's singing the Norma part in Mira Norma with me, which was really sweet. But just really put my nose
I
to
would
the
have done a
grindstone.
revezo for you just in rehearsal.
You're hired. Next time I'm doing it, you're hired.
Or I could do Clotilda as well.
Oh, I think I'd prefer that actually, Fred. That'd be a lot of fun. But it really, I think by that point, it already was the nose to the grindstone kind of
Yeah.
mentality of just do it. And Adalgisa, one of the learning curves that I had with that particular one is that, as some people might know, there are several different keys that you can do some of the duets in. I learned through that when we were required to do it in the high key because Sandra Rovanovsky was doing the other cast, and that's the key she wanted it
Right.
in. And so we did it, and I was like, okay, I've got a high C, we'll do it. And of course, the approach to the Mira Norma duet is some of the hardest singing. The 2 or 3 pages going into that is just, it just stacks the voice really, really heavily. And so I was just having a time with it. But Fritza was actually the one, he just pulled me aside one day
Part
and
of
he was
Freaks
like,
of the Conductor. Yep.
yeah, he pulled me aside one day and he was like, Jamie, whatever you need, I am here for you. The thing I need from you is for you to believe that you can do this. And I was like,
Good for
okay,
him. Yeah.
okay. If this man who is conducting at the Met says that I can do this, then I can do this. And I
And who's a
just,
real specialist in bel canto.
yeah, yeah,
Even among
exactly.
conductors, that's
Yes.
his ace in
Yeah.
the sleeve. Yeah. Good.
So I would say the moment where I had the with that particular contract was the moment that I walked out for the applause. To this day, it is a rare thing that I hear applause that sounded like that. It felt like I was
Yeah.
at a football game
Yeah.
or the Super Bowl. It kind of felt like, I mean, it just the people were in the Met. I hear this in Spain. I've never sung in Italy, but I hear that this happens in Italy, like the stomping, the yelling, and all of that. That was happening at the Met that night when Angela and I came out for bows. And I just kind of thought, oh, this is what people talk about. This is the moment that people remember for the rest of their lives. And quite honestly, I think I will. It's marked on my soul.
Well, I have a theory about that, not regarding you specifically, but about audiences.
Yeah.
That when I started going to opera, I was a tyke. I was not even 3 years old, but that's another story. And
Holy
the first
crap.
opera was Buttsack. But anyway, I'm not kidding. I'm really not kidding.
Wow.
But but I got into opera very early. I had a wonderful musician father and a mother who worked at Lincoln Center, so therefore
Yeah.
I was on the path early. And I heard audiences cheering Leontine Price and Birgit
Yeah.
Nielsen, Joan Sutherland, and the three tenors and Vickers and all
Yeah.
those people when I was 10 and 12 and 15. They were more demonstrative then. They
Yeah.
just were. And I don't know
Yeah.
why that is. Maybe they think it's cool to not emote.
Yeah.
But, when Leonie Riesnick sang at the Met, it was just hysteria in the best way. And many, many artists. And even later, Domingo, that happened. But unfortunately, current audiences in America don't emote in the same way. But what
Yeah.
you had for that Norma, apart from a great performance for both of you and all of you, was that we had people turn out who were old in a good way and
Yeah.
remembered how to respond to great singing.
Yeah.
So what
Yeah.
you heard was the voices of experience from the audience.
Yeah. It was
And
incredible,
the
honestly.
Spaniards, especially Barcelona, but all over Spain, but Barcelona to me is the best opera audience I know anywhere in the world.
I've yet
And
to be there. I've been in Madrid, but I've yet to be in
okay,
Barcelona, and I look
Madrid is
forward to that.
terrific too, the Teatro Real, all over Spain.
Yeah.
But when you go to Barcelona, we'll talk. I have people there. It's a wonderful opera house. The best single performance of an opera I think I ever heard was there in April
Really.
of 1979. It's hard to say the best, but it was Andrea Chenier with Montserrat Caballé and Jose Carreras for the first time that Catalunya had the right to speak in Catalan. So the program was printed
Wow.
in Catalan. These were the big Catalan stars,
Yeah.
and it was national identity. And have Andrea Chenier, the poet, speaking about love and Viva la Morte Insieme. The
Yeah.
crowd knew the opera; they went wild, and the two artists, all the artists were great, but it was also the audience that made it incredibly special.
Yeah.
And every
Yeah.
time I go back to Barcelona, there's something about that audience. It's just
Yeah.
thrilling. So we'll talk to your manager, Michael. We'll get you to Barcelona.
I would love
um,
that.
but anyway, then really in not much time, you, as you mentioned, you laid out a path with your manager, Michael, who I know. Um,
Mhm.
and what I love about your path at the Met, and not only, is that it's incredibly diverse.
Mm.
Your fellow Georgian once, Jesse Norma once said, "Pigeonholes are for pigeons," and it's the same kind of thing. That it's not that you would put on one track like just bel canto. Nothing
Yeah.
wrong with bel canto, which I love, but you were singing um, Yezi Baba in Rusalka, which
Yeah.
is kind of like the sister daughter of the witch in Hansel and Gretel
Yeah.
in a way.
Yeah.
And you were singing. The reason I want to ask you about that one, although you before that did Giovanna in
Mm-hmm.
Anna Bolena with Sandra Radvanovsky,
Oh
conducted by
yeah.
Marco Miliato, Venena in Nabucco with Domingo singing Nabucco,
Yeah.
Ludmila Monastirska, Russell Thomas, James Levine conducting, and then Yezi Baba, is because in that cast of Rusalka, in addition to Christina Pelais, who sang the title role, you had Brandon Jovanovich, Catalina Delayman, and Eric Owens,
Yeah.
and Mark
Yeah.
Elder conducting. Those three, in addition to everything else they do, are great Wagnerians.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether, as still a very young artist at that point, singing a major role, but not, you don't sing a lot of Czechs. Unless you're Czech, you don't sing a lot of Czech music. I mean,
Yeah.
one, yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
more the major operatic languages, and Czech opera is marvelous and so melodic. But you had Eric Owens, Katalina Delayman, and Brandon Jovanovich,
Yeah.
all of whom I've heard in tons of Wagner magnificently. Did
Yeah.
that composer's name ever come up in rehearsals and conversations and with those three or with anyone?
I don't recall it coming up in those particular rehearsals. That being said, I really think that there is a direct line from Dvorak to Wagner,
Yeah.
whether it be the through composed thing, which of course Wagner is the king of, um, or just the way the story is paced. There's something about Rusalka that I think is just a really beautiful pacing of a story. How it is written, how the tessitura sits for all of the different characters. The tenor can sit a little on the high side in some awkward moments, but really for the rest of us, to me, it felt very much like singing Fricka in a way. And when I say that, it is very much in contrast to the bel canto stuff. The bel canto stuff, when I wake up in the morning, I have to warm up. I have to be good to my voice. I have to be a little careful with it. I have to get into the right mental space to put my technique where it needs to be. I need to not be sick. I need to not like there are just a lot of factors that really go into it. And for me, that is because it sits just a click higher in tessitura. It just requires just that one half step higher. Wagner and Dvorak are just a little bit lower in tessitura, and there is something about, for me, just as an artist, there's something about the through composed way of singing that reminds me of art song in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
And because of that, I think I connect a little more intuitively to it. And it's kind of lovely singing something like Fricka or Yeji Baba and knowing that I can kind of do some lip trills in the shower, have 5 minutes at the piano in my dressing room, and then be completely fine for the rest of the night.
Mhm.
But it's too, the Dvorak to me, gosh, I just love that opera so much. And when the Met came to Michael asking if I would be willing to not only consider Yeji Baba, but I needed to audition for it because it was
Ah,
a new production. It just so happened to be that I was going to be doing Falstaff in Japan, and Fabio Luisi, who was originally slated to be the conductor, was going to be conducting that Falstaff. So we agreed that I would sing through a bit of Yeji Baba with him in Japan. Um, and once I got into that and I understood that this was not only going to be happening, I was going to be hired for it, but that this was going to be an HD, it was going to be a major, kind of step into a language that I did not know very well. That's when I was like, I need to do some art song that's in Czech. So I picked
yeah.
up the Dvorak Gypsy songs, which I then later ended up recording. But it, it really to get the facility of the language along with it to make sure that I am telling the story in a way that if a Czech person is listening to this, they're not going to be distracted by the fact that I'm an American with an American accent trying to sing their language. It's very, very important to me. That is a part of my job that I am a stickler when it comes to. And I'm so glad that I had the time between when they had offered it to me and then when I actually did the opera to be able to get a little more familiar with the language through the gypsy songs for sure. But
Now, after you did that, you did more theater rattling Normas at the Met that I attended all of them. And then, boom, cannon shot again into the ring cycle
yeah, yeah,
as Fricka in both Rheingold and Valkyra.
yeah.
And that's why I asked you about whether the Wagnerians that you were singing with in Rusalka, whether the subject came up, because when you and I were paired to host San Francisco Opera Siegfried, I had seen you already, and I knew that you had the Wagner inclination and the chops and all of that. Um, Fricka is an incredible role in that it's not the longest role in the cycle, but she's the one who lays down the rules to Wotan, who allegedly is the boss, but she's the one who lays down the rules that sets every other thing in motion for the next
Yeah.
15 hours.
She's pivotal.
And her
Absolutely.
voice, her rules, her presence
Hmm.
have to be felt all the way through.
Yeah.
And I've worked with and I've seen many great frickas. I will never single out one because they're all great. I must say that the one I learned the most from was Krista Ludwig in
Oh yeah.
working with her on it. But that's because there was only one Krista Ludwig.
Yeah.
But I, Stephanie Blythe, so many wonderful frickas I've worked with, and I didn't work with you on your fricka. I had the pleasure of sitting and watching and hearing your fricka, and it was an amazing event.
Thank
And you
you.
were very young. I mean, fricka can be a young wife.
Hmm.
It's not that Mr. and Mrs. Botan have to be in their 70s.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but she's not always played young. She's played as the upholder of laws, as um, I'm not going to name any current political figure, but someone who she's not. She could be Melania in that she likes her house.
She likes her house and she likes some gold.
All right, we'll leave it at that. And she wants a bridge between herself and everybody else.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But anyway, talk about in any way you want about developing the character of Fricka. When I will just say parenthetically, wonderful artist though you were very young, and it takes life experience and musical experience
Yeah.
to pull that off effectively, and you really did.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Um, so my Wagner journey has been a little funny. I started the very, very first Wagner I either heard and happened to sing was doing the opening scene of Rheingold. I think I was Flosshilde. That makes sense.
Hmm.
In a scenes program at Houston Grand Opera, Ryan McKinney was singing Albrecht.
Uh,
I was singing alongside Rebecca Cam and Faith Sherman. And the experience, Kathleen Kelly was the person who gave us that experience because she was the head of the studio at the time, and she, of course, had been kind of Levine's right hand woman. And she basically just decided she was like, we've got some potential Wagnerian singers here. I want to give them the opportunity to have a safe way to get into it. And I learned through that process that actually it fits my voice very, very well. Of course, as a young singer, we're all told don't listen to Wagner, don't sing Wagner, don't
hmm
look at Wagner, don't do anything with Wagner. It could ruin your voice. And the thing is that I think in some ways that is correct. If you're not set up to sing that music, if that's not what you physiologically are set up to do, then you can push yourself, and that's not a good thing. You can end up with a wobble, and nobody wants that. But when you are set up for it, when you come into this life with the resonant spaces within that can literally do that job, then there is something about the tessitura, the writing, very Italianate writing from Wagner, actually, that really is conducive to just beautiful legato singing. And so when Houston was actually the first one to offer me Fricka, they were doing one per year. I thought, yes, absolutely. I want to try this here. This is perfect. It was the Valencia ring, which meant that I was on a cherry picker
On
crane, which was,
stilts, or yeah, cherry
yeah,
picker, yeah.
yeah. It was a little disconcerting to begin with, but my mom actually used to teach rock climbing, so I was fine with heights. It was just being on heels on a crane that was not my favorite. But it was wonderful because my job was to stand on the crane, not move my body beyond just acting, but just stand on the crane and sing. And it gave me the opportunity to really plant myself within the rootedness of Fricka.
Yeah.
That is a part of who she is, and the rootedness that is required in the singing, and just to do it. So I was so glad that I got to do that before I went to the Met and did the one there. But truly, it was. This is the culmination of so many people. Kathy has been a huge person for me in not only coaching through music, but also talking through the characters, talking through their psychology. I have a lot of empathy for Fricka. I know she has a lot of the term harpy comes up with her quite a bit, and
Yeah, but
I
no.
don't agree with that, honestly. I think Wagner absolutely composed her to sound like that at times. You know, you get into the very first the second scene of Rheingold, and all of her stuff sits just up in a tessitura that is to denote panic, and then is offset by Wotan, who is coming out of sleep and also feeling completely fine. You know, so there is this dynamic of her feeling panicked and him feeling very chill. You know, so I understand why people come to that. But he married the goddess of contracts and marriage, and by the time we get to Valkyria, he has absolutely broken all of that between
Everyone.
them. And I kind of feel like she could even overlook that on some levels if it hadn't been him trying to manipulate the laws that he created himself to then sway things that are happening in human life, not even talking about them being twins. You know, so I really have empathy with her being the line of, no, come back to your truth. This is the truth. This is morality. This is what you need to be listening to. You can't just go make up rules that suit your needs whenever you want. And I have to say, as a woman, I kind of love getting to sing a woman that puts a man in his place. There's
Well, I'm going to
something.
tell you what Crystal Ludwig said to me, because I was not a baby opera worker by then, but I was still a young man. And I always went to people like Crystal Ludwig and Marilyn Horne and asked them questions. And she said to me, the secret to Fritka is she knows what she wants and what has to be. And I
Yes.
love that formulation, because what she wants and what has to be, but Krista didn't say what has to be based on what she wants or what has to be because of law.
Yeah,
And I think there's room for both there.
absolutely.
And I love the
Absolutely.
way, and I always think of Fricka that way, the way Krista Ludwig described her to me.
Yeah.
Because we are limited in time, because you're the world's busiest mezzo soprano, we're going to move on to the ring, because there are other things you've done. There are many things you've done that I want to talk to you about. We don't have time for all, but I'm just going to put this out there. You were magnificent Orfeo in the Mark Morris production.
Thank
That's
you.
that. Then you were in a wonderful production, Don Carlos in French. I
Hmm.
didn't love the production, but I loved the performers. And then you were in one of my favorite operas, The Dialogues of the Carmelites, and what is allegedly the Met's best production. John
I
Dexter, certainly one
hmm
of them. And you basically need the A team. You need great artists in all the roles. Most of them are women.
yeah,
And you were Mother Marie.
yeah.
Now, what I always ask women who sing in this opera, which I love, is what role did you see yourself in and what role did they give you? And did you get the role you saw yourself as?
Memory is and has been my role. I love her so much. I'm Fred, you and I when we crack open a bottle of wine and you cook me dinner sometime, we're absolutely going to have to talk about dialogues because it is also one of my favorite operas. It
Oh,
is
yeah.
in my top three at all points.
My
Um,
top 10. Yeah.
yeah, it is for me, Mère Marie. I love characters that are complicated. I don't love it when they are just caricatures of human beings. I like it when they're a little complicated, and she is. You know, we know from the historical text of Mère Marie, who had written the books, you know, about this entire situation, that, you know, we can infer that maybe she was not as she might have written herself a little more sympathetically than it might have been. I'm kind of intrigued by that, but I also, from the very first time I did this opera, which funnily enough, it was my European debut back in 2010, um, Mère Marie for me not only is so complicated, but she truly is the kind of human being who believes so wholeheartedly in her convictions that she cannot let them go. And I've seen productions and I've been in productions where she gets the rap of being the angry nun who gets mad that she's not the one who gets the position as the second prioress. And I
Right.
loved doing this one because working with Sarah Ina Myers, who was the remount director on this, first day of rehearsal, she comes in and we all sit in a circle and we all, you know, get to know each other. But she tells us the historical, gives us packets of information of the historical context and the letters that were sent between different people. And it was almost like a vindication for me because it was so clear from all that was written between her and Lidouin that they adored each other. She understood exactly why they had to put Lidouin into the leadership position and why she, as potentially the bastard daughter of a prince, could not in the French Revolution be the one leading this. It would be too dangerous for her to be leading. So I so appreciated that Sarah let us come to the table wholeheartedly with who we felt the characters were. And Fred, that experience, quite honestly, in the midst of that particular season was one of not only the highlights of that season, but of my operatic life. Getting to tell that story with that particular group of women, getting to be on stage for Eileen Perez, you know, singing her very first Blanche.
Blanche.
Like
Extraordinary.
it really it revitalized my love of theater in the storytelling that we do. So you're talking to somebody who loves Mère Marie. She is the one I would want to be cast as, and I'm so lucky that I get to sing her.
Do you want Alice Coote was an extraordinary Madame de Coissy, and there at the Met in this production has been a whole line of extraordinary people. Regine
Yes.
Crispin, Carita Montiel, Alice Coote, just among the many
Yeah.
who are unforgettable in that role.
Yeah.
When I was chatting once with Jessie Norman and she had more or less left the opera stage, I said, "Would you consider coming back for that?" And she said, "I would."
Ugh,
Because I mean, she would have been an amazing Madame. It's not a long role, but it's one of the roles in all of opera, not just this one, that once done by a great artist, you never forget it.
yeah.
And
Yeah. I
Alice
wish I
Coote
could have seen
joined that
hers.
for me, that
Yeah.
list. You then, I'm really speeding through, were in Il Trovatore, Azucena. You've
Yeah.
sung Eboli. Have you sung Amneris?
I have. I actually
Yes.
just started singing Amneris a couple of years ago. I did it in Madrid and then just this last spring in Chicago.
Okay.
So,
Which so I will hear it. It leads me to another role that you did in Chicago. I've heard you in most of your roles, but not as Carmen.
Yes.
Would you talk about that particular production that I read copiously about and heard about from people? You tell it because I want people to know your Carmen.
Oh, oh man. So Carmen is one of those roles that for the longest time I wanted to sing. The psychology of the role is something that I've always been really intrigued by. Vocally, it fits like a glove. It fits exactly what my voice does really, really well. But I was told for the longest time that, of course, me as a plus size woman just would never be cast. And so I kind of, at that point in my life, took that on as like, okay, well, no point in spending brain power on that, you know? And the longer I went along in life, the more I began to understand that actually, if you, I firmly feel at this point that if you chalk her entire power up to her beauty, then you're missing the point. Um, it's her magnetism. It's her not being the typical woman who is socialized to please the man. It is so many things that once again I just love about her. And so during the pandemic, later stages of pandemic, Chicago Opera Theater reached out because they had been in talks with Stephanie Blythe. And Stephanie was, of course, starting to sing some roles that are tenor or even baritone roles. And they had asked her what she would want to do. And she had mentioned Carmen as one of those things. She'd love to sing Don Jose. And so they said, okay, but who would you want to be your Carmen? And she said, Jamie Barton, which
Love it.
Stephanie is, and she knows this, she is my idol in so many ways. Between her and Marilyn, I feel like I've
Yeah.
got two amazing guides to follow through this career. And so the fact that she named me was just, I mean, that is such a gift. But we got together.
Marilyn called me about Stephanie early on in the career and said, "You got to hear this girl."
Yeah, no kidding. Well, and
Yeah.
talk about somebody who can cross over from art song to aria
Yeah.
as well. I mean, gosh. But
Stephanie and I once had to talk about Sammy Davis Jr. and its artistry and what a great singer he is. So
yeah.
she covers everything.
Oh, she really, really does. She does. We got together for what ended up being a very, very quick kind of concert version of Carmen, a staged, somewhat semi-staged kind of concert version. Um, and it was just incredible. I will say also at the time I was recovering from a lower back issue. And so that was a bit interesting to, go on stage and be Carmen and then go off stage and hobble towards a chair to sit down for a little bit. But it was just incredible. The concept of this production was distinctly gender bendy, distinctly queer, and to be on stage with a whole bunch of colleagues who also identify in those ways and who were completely game to just try something that was completely different was so much fun. I only wish we could have had more time, and I only wish we could have done a full production of it because when I am telling Stephanie Blythe singing Don Jose is one of the best Don Jose's I've ever heard in my life.
I have no doubt.
There were moments when I was sitting backstage and I would be listening to her on stage, kind of, maybe my brain would be wandering for a second and then it would come back and I'd be like, that's a woman. That's Stephanie singing that right now. Oh my God. It's
Hmm.
just unbelievable. But like the fact that I get to say for the rest of my life that my very first Don Jose was Stephanie Blythe is just, to me, one of the coolest things on earth.
When that issue was raised to me about her Carmen's magnetism, I point out to one single moment where the Toreador is singing his song, and there's Mercedes Frasquita and Carmen,
Hmm.
and each of the women say, and I'm not a singer, La Amour, La Amour. And all Carmen has to do
Yep.
is sing La Amour, and
Hmm.
everybody looks at her.
Yep.
There's no doubt Mercedes and Frasquita are great,
Yep.
but they're not Carmen.
Yeah.
And the genius of Bizet was the way he could compose that using the same word,
Yeah.
l'amour, three times in the same melody,
Hmm.
but the way it's orchestrated makes us understand that Carmen is the one we look at. Now,
Absolutely.
I promise to be mindful of your time, and I love that you're here. So when I do these conversations, I only write one question before. I usually ask it at the beginning, but in your case, we spoke about Marilyn a bit. But here's my
Yeah.
story. I know that one of your great roles is Sister Helen Prejean in Dead Man Walking by Jake Heggie, a
Yeah.
magnificent opera. She's a Southern woman, the real Helen Prejean. You're a Southern
Oh
woman.
yeah.
Um, it's a fabulous opera. You are perfect for the role. What I want to ask you about is, and this applies to Meryl, and it could apply to Stephanie as well. Is there an Americanness about certain American opera singers, especially mezzos?
Hmm.
Sasha Cooke is another,
Hmm.
Grace Bumbry and Shirley Verrett in their ways,
Right.
although they were more international. And I don't mean in terms of where you sing, but I mean embodying values and a
Mm.
presence and a sort of common sense
Mm.
practicality that can
Mm.
go in mezzo land sometimes, not with Grace Bumbry, but everyone else. And I mean, Marilyn is a woman of the people. She made sure to sing
Yeah.
in all 50 states. And I
Yeah.
remember she called me up once from Wyoming. She said, "Well, I did it. I'm in Wyoming." So, as an American, having sung that quintessential American mezzo role of Sister Helen Bruchon, is there something to what I'm asking?
I think so. I mean, Jake Heggie, the composer of Dead Man Walking, says quite frequently, I've heard him say that he loves writing for mezzos very specifically because the timbre of our voice sits in a much more natural place, the common place for people. That's not to say he doesn't compose brilliantly and beautifully for people who sit higher as well, but I think there is something about that. I actually, this is my own theory. I was literally talking about this the other night. There is this overarching joke, and I'm sure you know it too, where sopranos and tenors are just kind of neurotic, and basses and some baritones and mezzos tend to be much more chill in general. And honestly, I think it's just because you have to. I know when I sing bel canto, for example, when I'm that half step a little bit higher, I have to be a little more neurotic. I have to,
Yeah.
I have to be there. There is a sliver of anxiety that exists that doesn't when I'm singing things that sit just a little more comfortably and a little more closer to the ground. And I think that that probably also pulls into the personalities. I know exactly what you're saying. I'm thinking about Marilyn, Stephanie, Lorraine Hunt Lieberson, like all of
But
these.
also women like Frederica Bonestad and Susan Graham, both
Yes,
of whom I adore in major,
yes.
major, major ways. They know that. Um, who they've done a lot more French repertory. It's not that you only have to do American English language
Oh, for sure
repertory.
not.
And
No.
actually, Susan Graham was the original Sister Helen Prejean,
Yep.
and now plays the mother of I forget his name, the man who was
Joe
committed
De
to murder.
Rocher.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I mean, these are wonderful artists, but I think also for me, it's the sound of the mezzo voice
Yeah.
that I'm very at home in that, and I like a lot of their roles, and I love all the other roles too. But there is something about reassuring when you have that kind of voice singing that kind of music, and she can be mellow or she can be super dramatic like Evelyn Amneris
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
Azucena or Fricka, who is dramatic without losing her cool.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it's such a wonderful range of music and character that calls on people like all the women I just named, plus Jamie Barton, as I conclude our program with immense gratitude. You are one of Fred's favorites. It's official.
Uh,
And I
I,
thank you, my dear, and I'll bring the wine.
I am so honored and I cannot wait, truly.
See
Thank
you
you.
soon.
Thank you so much for having me on for Fred's Favorites. I'm just honored.
Thank you, Jamie.
Absolutely.